Writer's Log, Stardate 123.324. I have recently hired an artist and have begun transferring over the intellectual materials. I can only hope that things will go well from here on out. Yeah, that's right, folks. So, if by this point, if you were on Twitter and you noticed that I put up an advertisement for, I'm sorry, not Twitter, X. If you have noticed that I had put on an advertisement on X, god damn it, I'm still gonna call it Twitter, then you would know that I have been looking for an artist for quite some time now. You can go ahead and ignore it because by this point, I will have already have hired an artist. Basically, put a down payment right now, and yeah, hopefully, if you see their name right now on the screen, that is because they gave me permission to share it, or at least their Twitter handle. So yeah, feel free to give them some love because they are now part of the writing process. I'm saying they a lot because I'm not sure what their gender is or if they even identify with any single one. But um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll have a group interview when you guys get to ask questions. But that is something for another time. So, anyways, yeah, we're going to be discussing three things on this video. First one being about the experiences of hiring an artist. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just say that I was kind of, how do you say this? I was kind of curating it to be a little bit more professional. Like I had an application, I had interview slides set up. Like I had actually gone. Like I don't know what the heck I was thinking, but I think what was going on in my brain is I kind of wanted this to feel a little bit more professional. Like I had interview question, like I was gonna do interviews with the potential candidates were an artist. Like I even had like a PowerPoint presentation. Like you know those nerds that tend to go like and use Excel whenever they want to. I think I'm one of those nerds, except instead of Excel, I use PowerPoint presentations. I think I might be one of those nerds. And yeah, let's just say that the first lesson of the day, at least for me, was maybe you should accept. Sometimes you gotta accept that not everyone is gonna have the same expectation of professionalism. That doesn't mean they're not professionals. It's just that they're professionals in a different environment. And maybe for artists, maybe having something this formal isn't necessarily the best thing, but you do gotta stay flexible. I even had like an entire contract drafted up. That being said, though, there is a reason why I needed to do that. Two main reasons. One is to just get any potential disputes out of the way, you know, because the contract does. It's one of those contract templates where they say, "Oh, the job's gonna take place from this to this, and the other person will receive this amount of money, and I legally own this property, or I'm not paying." And the second one is of for tax reasons, because if I say I hired someone, there needs to be a definition of what that hiring looks like. Am I simply sorry, am I hiring this person because for a very simple job or a very specific job, and I only intend to hire them for this period of time, or is this going to become a more regular employment, so to speak? To put an example on that, we all know Spider Man. We all know Peter Parker. He he technically works for the Daily. If you've seen the Raimi trilogy, then you know that for the most part, Peter had been paid as a freelance photographer, meaning technically he is not a regular employee at the Daily Bugle, but rather he is contracted by the Daily Bugle to basically send in pictures of Spider-Man, and he gets paid for how many pictures he gets and the quality of the pictures that he sends. So his payment, his income is based off of how much he can produce. However, in the third Raimi movie, Spider-Man 3, that's when J. Jonah Jameson actually floats around the idea of either making Eddie Brock or Peter Parker a regular staffed member of the Daily Bugle. Essentially, not only giving him a fixed salary, but also potentially other benefits like health insurance, pension, that kind of thing. Basically anything that would be required in the state of New York. So you can so basically it means he would receive a regular salary, which means and on top of that he would basically be free to photograph non Spider-Man things and still have them featured on the Bugle. So yeah, that's basically kind of what this covers. So basically, it would be me saying, "Hey, I hired this person. I hired them for this specific job for this specific amount of time. I'm paying taxes in this form." Because yeah, I'm basically gonna have to show. I'm basically gonna have to show that show this when I have to actually. I'm gonna have to show this when I do taxes. So yeah, that's something that I didn't think I'd have to explain. And while technically I didn't sign a contract, in the state of Texas, if you have it written down or if there's a paper trail of some sort, like, say, a string of messages via Twitter, that technically counts as a contract. As long as there's something that can. Heck, even just a verbal agreement is considered a contract in this state. So, it's not necessarily the most solid thing because hearsay is always a thing, but I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be just fine. Anyways, in other news, adding to the queue of videos I plan on making, it's about the new Scott Pilgrim anime. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, or as I would like to prefer to call it, the disappearance of Scott Pilgrim. Now, if you have not read the comic books or have not seen the films, then you might be a little bit confused because originally, um, what we expected from the anime was sort of a rehash or a retelling of the Scott Pilgrim story. If you're not familiar with it, long story short, yada yada yada, Canadian guy played by Michael Cera, yada yada yada, yada yada, meets the girl of his dreams, yada yada yada, fights 7 evil ex-boyfriends, yappa yappa. I honestly just honestly watch the movie, read the comic books, you'll get the gist of it. Anyways, the reason I call it the disappearance of Scott Pilgrim is because honestly, they kind of did a bit of a bait and switch kind of where it kind of takes place in an alternate timeline, so to speak, where Scott suddenly and mysteriously disappears, and most people think of him as dead, but Ramona thinks he's not gone. Let me do. And I think it's a good story, but I do seriously question why they felt the need to do a bait and switch. I honestly think if they had advertised it a little bit more honestly, I think it would have gone down a little bit easier. I mean, it's kind of the reason why I'm personally calling this because it feels like the working title for this was the disappearance of Scott Pilgrim, and simply because you know anime tends to do stories like that, and simply because I feel it's like a little bit more honest of what you it feels more honest in terms of what you expect. Because it is a good story, but I don't think everyone was expecting it. I don't know. Just a quick question for you guys watching this. Do you think the do you think if the story, or the general path was spoiled to you, like, oh yeah, Scott quote unquote dies in the first episode, and it goes off the rails from there. Do you guys think it would have? Do you guys think it would have been more received a little bit warmly? Because there are people that are just absolutely hating it, but I would disagree with that hate because honestly, the story Scott Pilgrim takes off, it does follow, like, it's still funny. It still has a lot of the same themes as the original story, but I kind of understand why some people were disappointed because sometimes people do really just want that one thing, but at the same time, sometimes you gotta appreciate it when when the creators decide to do something crazy, which honestly is what is going on here. The creators decided to do something crazy, and I like it. All right. Okay, so that's that part of the way. Now on to the third and probably the thing that's taken up most of my notes right here. Technically, these things are unscripted. It's just bullet points. The most recent OSP Trope Talk, which is about super schools. Okay, so if you guys remember earlier, I did a video kind of going into Lily Orchard's video on Mary Sue's. I'm gonna go ahead and just say, I remember this is gonna be the same thing, but now it's being mixed in with my notes videos. So yeah, I don't know if that's more of a disrespect or more of a low key thing. Here's the thing, unlike with the unlike with that other video where I was just saying, hey, well, it's kind of the same thing, where it's like, on the one hand, I do respect OSP. I've been subscribed to their videos. I take a lot of notes and sometimes a little bit of inspiration from the stuff that they produce, be it talking about tropes and myths or talking about ancient history. I like what they produce. However, this is one of those moments where I have some things to say. And just know that it comes out of a place of love and also a place of frustration because I wouldn't be making videos about this if I didn't like the content. Okay, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll probably leave a link in the description so you guys can go ahead and watch that. Then come back, but I will be using clips from the video. So basically, uh, OSP talks about in this trope talk video. They talk about the concept of the super school, i.e., you know how there are some now in most media, in particular Harry Potter, where there is a very specific school. That's a big one. Okay, I'll get you it when I'm. Okay, let me explain. So in some pieces of media, you will see that there is the concept of the super school, whether we're talking about Harry Potter or the X-Men or My Hero Academia, where there's a school for a very specific thing where our protagonist will attend. Where unlike your regular school, it's a lot more specialized, specifically to teach the thing, specifically to teach, whatever it is that the heroes need to learn before they go off on their big adventure. And yeah, for the most part, it is somewhat solid. But there were a couple of things that were said that I particularly disagree. Or rather, I think things that need to be a little bit more clarified. So, first off, I think it's worth noting that depending on the not everyone's school experience is going to be the same. And I'm not necessarily saying that because, oh, some people actually liked school, or, oh, some people really hated school, or whatever. I mean, in the sense of how a school is structured is going to be different, and that's going to influence how you, and that's going to influence how you write the story. Um, in fact, just going down to the nationality or culture of the author, that'll influence how a school is structured, or how a school is, or how the school culture um, manifests. For example, I think it's safe to say that the experience of a Japanese high school student and an American high school student is gonna be different simply because of the way that the schools are structured. One big example that I can come up with is, of course, the fact that in Japan, a lot of times high schoolers, they're pretty much always going to be stuck within the same class. Like everyone's going to be pretty much going to be shoved into one class, or I guess to the point where you're basically stuck with the same group of idiots in one classroom, the same group of students in one classroom. And while the teachers might, and really at most, it's going to be the teachers that rotate and not the students. So for 3 years, you're going to be crammed in with the same group of students, and part of that is to sort of create a sort of group identity, because Japan is really places a lot of emphasis on group identity compared to individualism. This is why uh, the only time classrooms ever mix is in a club setting, and why students introduce themselves with their classroom number along with their names, because that has become part of their identity in a way, and why transfer students are sometimes seen as a bit of an outsider, and why, it's a big talk like, hey, we're getting a transfer students. Whereas in the United States, no one would give two craps about it, because in the United States, students kind of have a little bit more freedom in deciding what classes they're going to take. It's basically running from classroom to classroom, as many of you probably already know. In fact, you kind of, and not only that, but you get to sort of decide um, what classes to take, and what how difficult they are, and in some cases even when to take them. Just as a quick example, if you can take regular English, or you can take AP Literature, or what I did, basically take a special writing class specifically for creative writing, which apparently counted as an English credit. I didn't realize that, but yeah, that was a like there's a little bit more freedom in choosing, because there's more emphasis placed on the individual. They know that some students are already going to have a set career path, which is why you can either just take regular PE if you just want to get the credit over with and don't want to, you know, if you're not that physically, if you're not that physically, if you don't want to challenge yourself that much, or you can take, a interscholastic sport. I took football and swimming when I was in high school. Apparently, hiding amongst a bunch of football players is good to keep you away from bullies. And and of course, if you're not into that, then you can, of course, take JROTC, which apparently counts as physical education. And if you don't know what JROTC is, I'll get back into that later. And even just between states, the school culture is going to be different. For example, in terms of, for example, In terms of interscholastic sports, you're probably more if you expect surfing as a school sport, it's probably going to be in California and Hawaii. However, here in Texas, we're probably going to have equestrian sports, bull riding, and sharpshooting. Yeah, my sister took sharpshooting when she was in high school here in Texas. It's exactly what you expected it. Again, it's for JROTC. Anyways, during the video, I noticed that on the whiteboard, Red did mention a lot of the classic school tropes. However, it's worth noting that some of them are either outdated or really exclusive to certain regions. Like I think even I think even the Odd Ones Out explains that the whole science fair thing doesn't actually happen in the way that it is depicted in most media.
Oh, at my school, we didn't do the science fair. What? That got me wondering. Did other people not do the science fair? So I did my own science experiment on Twitter. I ran a poll and asked you guys if you even did the science fair and whether or not you enjoyed doing it. And 58% of you said you didn't have to do the science fair. Like, that was way more than I expected. That's the majority. I've renamed this group of people the lucky ones. And when I asked if you enjoyed doing it, 21% of you said you did enjoy it, and 21% of you said you didn't. Apparently, it's a very American thing, right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's safe to say if you saw it in the John Hughes movie, odds are it's probably no longer a thing. I think it is just sort of. I think this is sort of Red's bias coming through because limited perspective and all that. But I think it is worth reanalyzing what exactly it is that. It's sort of to say, one, re-examine what your idea of a school is, and two, can you change the structure a little bit, or ask yourself, what would make most sense for this school? Because again, I know they didn't mention Harry Potter in this, even probably for the reason of, no one wants to, bring up that one piece of media, but honestly, I think it's worth at least examining from an objective point of view. After all, Harry Potter is based a little bit loosely on the British boarding school system to a degree. So, a lot like I'm pretty sure like the structure at least how that all that works is a little bit like you can kind of clearly see a lot of the influences of J.K. Rowling's childhood in there, at least in school. But you get what I mean. Anyways, there's one particular moment where she brings up the whole, some of the potential events that occur in a school, and I don't know. I just want to ask you guys, just if any of you guys had the same feeling, because, Yeah, I'm just going to play the clip, but just listen closely and see if you can hear what I was hearing.
And those villainous interruptions are no joke. In fact, they usually increase in severity until the story eventually reaches a breaking point of the school under siege. This stock storyline can play out in a few different ways, but in general it signals a turning point in the story where the super school, hitherto a bastion of safety and artificial stakes, becomes compromised by the real threats of the outside world, endangering the students and upping the danger level of the story as a whole. This disruptive shift in the status quo is often traumatic and frightening as the heroes are exposed to levels of peril that the story previously protected them from just by virtue of tone. The school under siege is typically a darkest hour as the heroes realize how truly dangerous the world they live in is, and how much they were being shielded by their teachers and faculty, but at the same time how thin those walls really were, and how ephemeral the safety they promised. But don't worry, when the story needs a grand finale, they'll probably come back for graduation.
That was loud for me. Like, really loud. Like, okay, I think it might just be the fact that my brain tends to go to dark places sometimes with the right stimulus, but yeah, I feel like that should be something that, maybe you can still do this part of the trope still, but it is kind of terrifying. Or at least, I think it's like, if the school does get attacked, it better not be by a lone actor. Because that is too terrifying. And too close to home. At least as an American. Alright? And I say this as an American because this is one of those things that, yeah, we still need to deal with. Anyways, there's that. And then there's, of course, I don't want to I don't want to infer that she thinks school is just absolutely, like, she had a bad experience or anything, but I don't want to, I'm not going to pry into what potentially was going through her head, but I am of the opinion that, or at least of the philosophy of, and this is possibly because of my upbringing, of the idea that the world itself is a school. Now, what I mean by that, well, you never really do stop learning.
After all, the one truth of every school is that one day every student will stop being a student and get the chance to be a person instead. And I gotta say, being a person's a lot more fun.
Yes, you might not be in a classroom. Yes, you might not be wearing the uniform anymore. But you're always learning new things. You're always picking up something else. If you are not learning, you are dying. Or, if you are not learning, you are teaching. And honestly, I think if you look at Top Gun, that probably explains it. Actually, now that you think about it, Top Gun is probably another example of a real life super school. Think about it. It's a school. It's a very specialized school. Uh, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, Top Gun really does fit the whole idea of a super school. It's just hidden over layers of Tom Cruise and the U.S. Navy. But let me explain. I think a good question that you should ask yourself when doing this trope is: is a school really necessary for this kind of plot? And I'm not saying this, and I'm saying this because it does seem to pop up a lot. Are you? And the question and it does become a question at some point. Are you doing this because you think it would be a good idea? Or are you doing this because you saw this in other media?
It's why you have all those American-made shows about kids going to anime warrior school, and the fact that there's such a thing as anime warrior school is just never questioned, because a show they liked had it, and also Harry Potter.
I guess this kind of goes into the real life question of, what's the point of public school if you can just homeschool your kids, so to speak? Because in recent years, the idea of homeschooling has become a little bit more popular, especially after the pandemic. And in some cases, it's pretty valid. It's particularly in the case of students with students with special education needs, either because of a mental disability or the child just isn't challenged enough in a regular school. It could be either or. Or maybe you want a more specialized education for, say, a talented student in a different field. Like, say, for example, I think that's kind of the case for Lewis Hamilton, I think. Because I remember distinctly that his dad really invested heavily into his racing education. I think that also involved a tutor. I'm not 100% sure. But I think in those cases, maybe homeschooling would be the best case. But in other, I think Michelle Kwan was also homeschooled too. But those are like really extraordinary cases, or cases where the regular public school system was just not the right fit. However, I think there is, of course, pitfalls where, in a worst case scenario, it could be that the student ends up getting an inadequate education because the parents or the tutors are just not fit for that job. Or it could be that the child is being put in an abused environment. Or, worst case scenario, it's a cult of trying to breed neo-Nazis.
We are so deeply invested into making sure that that child becomes a wonderful Nazi. And
National
by
Social.
homeschooling, we're going to get that done.
Well, that is terrifying. You never want to hear a mother lovingly utter the sentence, "My kid's a wonderful Nazi," outside of maybe if they're praising their son's performance as Rolf in The Sound of Music. And even then, just say wonderful Rolf. What's wrong with you?
I don't know, like, I don't want to get that political, but it does get into the question of what's the point of a public school? Well, there are a lot of ways to look at it. For example, in the most cynical way, it could just be to ensure a standard of knowledge and a standard of physicality. For example, during World War II, they noticed that they had to reject a lot of volunteers simply because they grew up malnourished, and that's why in public schools they have cafeteria food, or that's why they offer school lunches. That's where the concept of the school lunch came from, and just in following that regard, it's to ensure that everyone has a base level of knowledge for whatever career that they choose to go to. Like, the whole point of a high school diploma is I have the base knowledge necessary to participate in society. The point of a 4-year degree then is, hey, I have a very specialized education that would, for a job that normally requires a higher pay. However, that the value of a diploma has kind of become a little bit more diluted, in my opinion. But that's me. That's my opinion. Of course, there's also vocational school, but I'm not even going to get into that. But I guess the more optimistic one would be that in a public school setting, one, you're going to be is also just the stuff that is besides the school, because Red does mention that. Well, yes, normally a kid would not want to be shoved into a classroom with a bunch of other losers, just, watching a very underpaid and very unenthusiastic person talk about a subject. It's also the stuff that is not in that environment that people really, where the purpose of a school is very much becomes apparent, where the value of a school becomes apparent. Well, on top of that, it's essentially a micro-society, so to speak, where you do sort of start to, interact with other peers. It's also where, as Ren mentions, you are starting to explore a little bit yourself. And it's also where you start to really, get a grasp of who you are, not just as a member of society, but as an individual. And even when you do leave that little micro society, you are still learning. And I think maybe it's just that we need a little bit more variety in what a school would look like, or what a school is defined as. Oh boy, I thought I had more to speak about that. Also, maybe, I think in some stories in most stories you're going to expect it to be from the perspective of the students, but I think it could also be interesting to tell it from the perspective of a teacher. I can go ahead and say that I'm a little bit more partial to the teacher has a bunch of misfit students and gets them up to par, possibly beating the elite students, so to speak. Your typical Jaime Escalante story, Stand and Deliver, if you've ever seen the movie. That's one of my favorites of all time, and that's simply because it's essentially a teacher trying to teach a bunch of unenthusiastic students, pretty much trying to teach them calculus, and whatever. Anyways, I think it's also worth noting, maybe looking into the potentially other forms of schooling, like say vocational school, or say night school or something like that. I mean, my mom, when she was here in the United States, my mom actually took English classes early in the morning. Like during the summer, my sister and I would just hang out in the park while she went like at the skate park. There was a community college in a park, and where she would take English classes. Meanwhile, my sister and I would hang out at the skate park, which we did do because California. And that's how I learned to skate. That's how we both learned to skate. Also, there were old Asian men flying model planes in the park. So skateboarding and model planes. But yeah, I think it would be a little bit interesting if you think about it. Like maybe you can take that inspiration and apply that to the concept of the super school. I'm saying it's a little bit more. I guess what I'm trying to say with all this is that, at least with the way Red described it, I think we're kind of narrowing our view of what school can be and what school should be. And I think we can broaden our horizons a little bit. Maybe be a little less reliant on the old tropes, and maybe realize that our concept of school has sort of evolved over time from the 80s. Because I think we're having that moment from when OSP did the those dang phones video, where we're suddenly meeting a disconnect between what we've grown up watching and what is actually going on.
This is just the main rabbit hole. The fact that social and technological norms invisibly infiltrate the fiction of its era, even if that fictional setting is completely divorced from reality, is a hugely interesting space of analysis at the root of everything from tokenized stereotypes to media aging poorly, to how storytelling has always been intrinsically political, to about half the arguments of death of the author. And because we lose sight of what defines normal as it becomes invisible to us from overexposure, it can be a bit shocking when we catch sight of something in the mirror of fiction that's shifted without our noticing.
Because here's an interesting question. What if Harry Potter, but by the time Harry knew he was a wizard, he was already 18. So now instead of going to Hogwarts, he now has to study for the Wizarding World's equivalent of the GED. It's interesting, right? That would be an interesting story. That would be something interesting to look into. No? Anyways, that's all I really got for this video. Anyways, regular content to follow. Feel free to like, subscribe, and yeah, I'll keep working on that book. Until then, this is me saying, thank you for being smart. Sayonara.